Hello everyone and welcome back to episode 5 of the EveryDay Pundits Podcast. My name is Nathan and I'm joined by my other co-host Evan.
We back, baby.
Yeah. Well, we just wrapped up the first leg of the British Grand Prix at Silverstone. So I think we definitely have some things to talk about in the first
I'm still trying to catch my breath, to be honest, mate. It's bloody...
Yeah. If that doesn't interest you, then there are timestamps. If you are on YouTube, there are timestamps down in the description.
Yep.
We have also added time tags along to other platforms as well, depending on where you're listening. But yeah, so we're also going to talk about, we're going to have a little preview of the England-Pakistan tests that are coming up next week. Ev's going to do some stuff on some of the NBA games that have happened so far. So going to touch a bit on the hockey.
Yeah, a little bit on the hockey. Yeah, a little bit.
FA Cup. I don't know if I mentioned that already. But
we're both run through that. Yeah. No, you haven't.
And yeah, we're also going to touch on the Festival of Rugby that's going to just been announced between some of the teams in the Northern Hemisphere and some Southern Hemisphere teams as well. But let's get into it, Ev. Why don't you start us off? Formula One.
Well, where do we start from, really? I think, well, let's start with how the weekend kicked off. Well, before there was even, a car on the track, we had a bit of drama, didn't we, with Sergio Perez?
Yeah, I hope he's doing all right. I hope, he's feeling okay, and I hope, everything gets back to normal for him as soon as possible. Best wishes.
But he obviously had an inconclusive test in his first one, so they were a bit, nervous of if he had it or not, and then they came back that, he had it and he had to self-isolate, so... the Hulk was back.
The Hulk
Return
was back. Of the Hulk.
Yes, right. He came back after being unceremoniously dismissed last year by Renault for Ocon, and it was a weird.
It was all it was very exciting, and then
it was all. Well, I mean, to be honest, it kind of called it. Like he was having problems with his neck. He wasn't quite used to the G-force yet.
Yeah, I think it's not great going in an F1 car for a year and then coming back.
I mean, it might be a little bit of a change of pace, to be honest. And then also, he had the moment where he was struggling with the seat and, had a posterior problem. Let's put it that way.
Didn't he?
Yeah, he had to have a break because...
Didn't he say... I think he said... not to quote him, I think he said my arse is numb.
Yeah, he did, literally. So it was... And then, unfortunately... We get to race day, and 2 minutes before race, they announce on F1, he will not start the race because there was a power unit problem.
Yeah, power unit failure.
And he didn't even get going. So,
at least he had some time behind the wheel of the car properly, at race kind of race pace.
And it was good to see him out there. He was in the practices. He was putting in good times. He was quite competitive for someone who hasn't raced in a year. Especially comparatively with someone like Ocon, who when he came back wasn't competitive.
Who actually had a good race today.
He had a very good race.
We'll get on to that.
We'll get back to him. But I just love seeing Nico in the sport. I think he's a great middle driver. I think it's a crime. I've said it before. I'll say it again. It's a crime that he's not in this year. Yeah. Because how he's not a driver when you've got still the likes of Grosjean and others, let's just say that, for example, I know he is who he is, but Raikkonen, I know the car's terrible, but it was bad. It's really bad for him. Giovinazzi, another one who's really just that Alfa Romeo team looks in disarray right now. The car's underperforming.
It kind of is a bit like they just don't. I don't really think they have any idea. They're a bit like, well, we're down here and there's nothing we can do to get any higher at the moment. But I think that the whole thing with Hulkenberg's power unit failure just kind of kicked off what was really the start of a pretty not great weekend.
No, they showed glimpses of how they've been, and it's such a shame because we've seen them really push for that third spot.
Yeah, well, they had podium in the last race.
We've seen them really go from being a team that was on the, in the really fighting the midfield to a team that's legitimately a challenger for the third
threat,
spot.
To the big three, if you will.
Yeah, exactly. And how we've seen them, it was a shame because Stroll, I know he had I think he topped, was it practice 2?
I can't remember off the top of my head.
Okay, I'm pretty sure it was practice 2 that he topped, yeah. And it was like, okay, here we go. They got the speed again. And then, I don't know, they just never really got going in qualifying.
Yeah.
I know he did get 6th in qualifying, so it wasn't bad. But he got out qualified by a McLaren, and he wasn't too far ahead of the Renaults for what the car they've had and the package that they've produced. You'd have expected them to be a bit further, at least ahead of Ferrari.
I think the safety cars didn't help Racing Point. I think it was, it wasn't great for any of the cars in the top 10, really.
Yeah.
What with Grosjean being out in I think he was in 5th place, wasn't he?
Yeah, he didn't
that didn't help
fifth,
a lot of the teams behind 5th. But I think the safety cars, particularly for Stroll, because the grid was so packed up after so many laps with the safety car, and props to safety car driver, but he just struggled because he was in so much traffic. I think he struggled to get back up the field after that. And I think Stroll's a young driver, and you can't put too many expectations on him. I think he's doing what Racing Point will be hoping that he's doing at the moment. But and everyone has a bad race. Like Norris had a dreadful race a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, that was not good.
No. Any other standouts from this weekend you want to run through?
Well, we got a lot to talk about, haven't we? About this
actually,
weekend?
I know why I said that. There's a lot to talk about.
We haven't even got into the race really.
No, not really.
So we'll just briefly run through what was fairly, I don't want to say shocking, but it was kind of eye-opening to how quick again the Mercedes are. It's like every track we get to.
It's crazy, yeah.
Hamilton, his lap was incredible. Don't get us wrong. It was 1:24.3. That's ridiculous around Silverstone, and he's over a second quicker than Max Verstappen. You shouldn't be that quick around that track. A second is a lot, and it's like when they first moved to this turbo hybrid era, and they're that far ahead of that's that much ahead of everyone that it's not really a contest. They're in their own little race again, and you're worried that But
we said, for most of the race, I mean, we were, we have a little Formula One group chat with a few of our friends, but we were saying it's a bit of a weird race for a lot of it because it was Mercedes miles out in front. Then you had Verstappen kind of just driving on his own. Well, he was driving on his own. He was 20 seconds behind the Mercedes and 20 seconds in front of the Ferrari. So it's a bit like he's just racing on his own. He's pretty much guaranteed third no matter what he does, as long as, as we saw, as we'll get into. But, and it was a bit like you got Charles in 4th, who's probably thinking, this Ferrari's bad, but at least it's not as bad as Seb's, because it's true though, isn't it? He's probably thinking, God, this car is terrible, but at least I'm not in Seb's car. And it was just a bit weird. And then you had an amazing race going on between Norris, Sainz, Ricciardo, Ocon, and Stroll. And there was some great racing down there. But the front three, really, you could just kind of chop that off and go, here's where the actual racing starts for a lot of the race. Yeah.
So obviously getting into this race now, we were shocked by some of the pace of the cars. Norris unfortunately got held up a little bit. You felt like Verstappen held him up.
Yeah, I think the first lap, obviously he dropped 2 places in the basically off the first lap, essentially, pretty much.
Yeah.
But you could kind of see they showed an aerial shot of them going into the first couple of turns. I think it was turn 2, but it might have been turn 3, where he's coming into the corner behind Verstappen, and Verstappen's obviously battling with Bottas at this stage.
Yeah.
And you can kind of see where Verstappen has to back off Bottas because, there's no space for him to get through.
And he's also got Leclerc on his outside.
Yeah, exactly. And he has to slam the brakes on pretty early, otherwise he's going to get squeezed. And Norris coming into the corner on the racing line behind Max, he kind of has to hit the brakes hard, and it kind of screws up his whole corner entry. And now, that gives the window for Sainz and Danny Ricciardo to make up time and gain ground in the corner.
Down into Brooklands, he had a huge lockup, and that kind of set him back literally 2 places. Yeah, and then he was fighting a lot.
Because he actually didn't, off the line. It was pretty, Max and Lando had a pretty good start off the line.
And it's a shame that he got held up and hampered, because who knows what he could have done. I don't think he would have, got podium if he was, but you never know, especially with what we saw later in the race, if he could have just cleared that gap and didn't get held up and pushed back into the battle with Stroll, another one who got massively hampered from the start, and then ended up down in 8th. I think for most of the race.
I don't know if you agree as well, but I think the expectations on Lando after his one podium have been so high, and I think we said this in when we were talking earlier as the race was going on. I sent a message saying, "Do you think Lando is doing what the McLaren team wants him to do?" And the general consensus was, he's a young driver and he's not in a championship contender car. He's in a good car, but with the car that he's got, McLaren and him are both improving, and really that's what you want him to do. You want him to be in the points every week, which for the most part he has been, because I think although they did finish higher than the Racing Points, a lot of people will be saying the Racing Point is probably a better platform.
I think it was it's very reminiscent of when in the early 2010s, when obviously similarly you had Red Bull, who were this unbelievable force that no one could catch up with, and you had the McLaren at that time was like third car, maybe for like second or third car, but it was that like battling, and I think it's very similar that he's just outperforming everyone's expectations of what he was doing, similar to how McLaren was back then. They're not going to get a win. They were never going to get a win back then. They're not going to get a win this year unless we get a stupidly big pile up at the front and the Landog or Carlos Sainz end up at the,
I know you're excited leading to see Danny Rick and Lando.
I was so happy. I was so happy with the race for Danny Rick. I thought he drove a stormer.
Raced excellently.
I think Renault actually nailed it in the race. They actually gave him a car.
Who was right? There was not Ocon in that car.
No,
I was like, what? What is this?
We saw an overtake.
I was like, bloody hell, Ocon is looking good.
Oh, mate. And I thought Cyril Abitbol finally got it right, and Renault finally got a car that in the race didn't look
dreadful.
Slow. It looked like it dragged so much. I don't know if it's because of the way Silverstone's built with all the downforce that you need. You don't need a lot of pace, you just need your downforce. I know that's one thing they tried to really focus on.
Cars were struggling, cars like tire deg. Again, we'll get into that. But
Danny Rick, he had a great race. He didn't have the best qualifying, but we've seen this from Renault throughout most of the year. Their one lap pace isn't on par with the McLarens, Racing Points, and somehow this weekend they just seem to thrive under these conditions. I don't know if it was the cooler track or if it was the downforce, like whatever the reasoning was.
Yeah.
They finally got some moves and they finally looked like a competitive car in that midfield battle that we previewed. We thought they'd be up there. We thought, we didn't think that, say, the Racing Point would be as good as it was. We knew it was going to be good, but we thought they'd be a lot closer to that. And, shall we get into the start of the race then? Obviously, after the start of the race, with Alex Albon and the Kevin Magnussen incident.
Yeah.
Shall we call it?
I don't know. I think, me personally, I thought the gap was perfectly there. I don't think Albon did anything wrong from my perspective. I think that, he was obviously quicker than Magnussen. And I think people say you could draw a parallel between when Lewis Hamilton knocked Albon off when, kind of a little bit. It was a little bit different, but
I mean,
it was kind of
Hamilton was on the outside.
Bomb.
Hamilton was a dive bomb on the inside where there was a gap with Magnussen. He did run wide, like you said.
Well, that was where my point of view was, is that Magnussen was. There was no way he wasn't on the racing line. He had no business trying to cut the corner, hit the curb. He was already too far past. And my point of view, I think that the only reason he ended up making contact with Albon was because he tried to shut the door, and I just think Magnussen's fault. I don't think it was Albon's fault. He obviously had more pace going into the corner. He was in control of the car the whole time. He could have exited the corner. He had great traction. He was going to get great pace out of the corner. Yeah. And then, Magnussen was pretty much already round the corner at this point. He had no business coming back to try and cut the curb. Yeah. And from my point of view, it's just, he shut the door to try and get Albon to back off. It didn't work because Albon was pretty much already exiting the corner at this point. Well, he was exiting the corner.
The thing was, when you watch it again, it's kind of, I can see why they're giving it, because I feel like if Albon had have carried on driving, I know he didn't have the line perfectly because he would have cut the apex, but I feel like if you watch, he does hit the brake, and as he hits the brake, that's when Magnussen carries on going, because he knows he's missed the corner, so he's got to make up for his error. So he tries to get good traction, and as he brakes like that, he goes bang, and that's what's happened. He's sent him flying.
I don't know. Maybe because I've only seen the as it happened and the replay they showed.
Yeah.
From the other angle, but for me, I just thought that Magnussen had no business coming back to try and sort of hit the apex of the corner when he was pretty much already around it.
Given what we've seen in the past and accidents that haven't got time penalties and accidents that have, I do think it was a little bit harsh, but I can also see that they've got to institute fairness into the sport.
Yeah,
so
I guess.
Even though it may not have been I personally would have put it down to a racing incident, but what we've seen recently and in the past, I think they had to give a time penalty just for consistency.
It kind of just topped off again a horrendous weekend for Alex Albon. Obviously, not making it out of Q2 again.
It's I don't know what's going on. It's worrying.
Yeah,
it's sad to see a guy who just looks, even when he's driving. I know he went to the back and made up and got an 8th.
Maybe him and Vettel should just go start their own team.
Yeah, the Lost Boys, but they're it was and then we obviously that brought out the first safety car. Then we had another little period of a little bit of jostling in the midfield.
People were very upset about the safety car. I think they complained that it was going too slow.
Yeah, Bernd Mailander, to his credit, it's not much he can do with these cars that can go so much quicker through corners, and he's it's. I know they thought that Mailander was going a bit too slow, but it's always a problem in these cars where you can go stupidly fast. You've got a car that can only do a certain amount of speed down Woodcut or the hanger straight, and there's not much you can do. But then we also we had a little bit of a lull, like we said, and it was a bit of a thing back and forth in the midfield, and then we had Kvyat, who coming into Cops got a back right puncture, it looked like, and went off into Maggots and Beckett's, and big impact. And you were a bit amazed by how much of a diva he looked like after the car.
Well, I think he hit that because if he'd hit it side on, then there's a bit more area. I guess it kind of makes sense that if you hit the side of the car and there's more of the car hitting the wall, I guess it's not all the forces going in one place. Yeah. But then when you hit it dead on the nose like he did, and they said that the impact was over 25 Gs, which is why they had to get the medical car out, which is a big impact. And for him to just get up, but you could tell he was a bit up. He was annoyed. Gave the camera a little slap,
little love tap.
Yeah, but
I thought it was a bit weird to see him so dejected and so.
He was angry. If you heard him on the radio, he was said, "Look, I'm really sorry."
But it's weird because I don't think it was his fault.
No,
it was a back right puncture. I think he must have thought he's made an error going onto the grass.
I think that's what it was, because he did cut the very fine on the track margins, and then all of a sudden he's sliding into the runoff area, when in reality it wasn't his fault. But I think he probably thought, I've clipped the grass, and then ended up in the runoff area, which really it wasn't what happened. I think that was the second time we saw a wheel off the car. Yeah, in that race,
and I think watching the replay, he'll probably go back and think, okay, that he can actually be like, okay, it wasn't my fault. It was just the car, and that kind of kicked off. It was a nice little prelude to what we saw in the closing stages of the race.
Speaking of AlphaTauri, big up yourself, Pierre Gasly.
Yes,
I mean. Where did that come from? I said, though, towards the end of the race, I said, it's not going to be long. I know, I said last weekend, Pierre Gasly's car is just going to give up on itself. And
you're a big defender of Pierre Gasly, who hasn't had the easiest time of the last few races.
He had issues when he was at Red Bull. And
second car driver again.
Yeah.
Here we go. But, and it was good to see. And he overtook Vettel, which was, bit dubious. It looked like he may have re-entered the track ahead when he was, he gained a thing, but I think he had a great race, and it was nice to see. I rate Gasly. I think he's a good driver.
I think he had a similar problem to what Albon has had at Red Bull, where he was just constantly second to Max Verstappen, and they just made it much harder for him to really do anything.
Well, it's hard when you move to a new team and you get all of these new people, you get new race engineers. I know Albon's now switched his race engineer, I believe. Yeah. And you get all these new parts, essentially. It's like a new car. You get a new part and you have to try and make it work and see how it's going to fit. And it just looks like with Max already established and set in the team, he's fine.
Yeah.
And everyone else just has to fall in place.
Well, that's what I think I said in episode 1, that you can't really be surprised that Albon is not going to post. There's two reasons, really. One, Red Bull are actively making sure that he doesn't post the similar lap times to Max. And Max has been in that car for, 3 years now. And obviously it's not this exact same iteration of the car, but, he's used to, like you said, his race team, just being, an employee of Red Bull. Whereas Alex Albon is not. Toro Rosso back then were pretty much Red Bull's B team, but
well, they are.
Well, they are, but
and it's. I think it was a good weekend for the young French drivers. Obviously, we've already commended Ocon on actually showing something,
and showing up to the race,
not slacking, and it was good to see. And then we'll get into this now. It all kicked off when obviously we saw the problems that were coming on the Mercedes rights.
Well, you could see it. There was a big blister on the inside right. Was it really inside right of Valtteri Bottas's car? And then all of a sudden, just all kicked off.
But 15 minutes before that all happened.
Let me explain. Mystic Meg, Evan Perkins over here. Yeah. I'll read you out some of the passage of what was happening in the Formula One group chat.
Possibly my best call for live sports.
Well, definitely your best call in live sports, where I said after match race coverage made it obvious that Mercedes were having problems. I said, do you think they'll end up pitting in the end? And Evan and one of the other members in the group said, no, they got, pretty much 10 to 15 second gap for both.
They didn't have a pit window. That was the problem.
Yeah. So, they said probably even though there's, 5 or 6 laps to go, they'll have plenty of time to just lose time on the poor tyres. And if they pit, they might not have time to make the time up again. And then Ev goes, unless, it's like Ferrari a few years ago where both cars have to retire.
Yeah.
Lo and behold, it came very close to
It was almost identical. In 2017, Raikkonen's in second, Vettel's in fourth. Lap 49 of 51, very similar, 2 laps to go. Raikkonen complains that his tyre's going away and his left tyre catches a puncture and he has to limp home to the pits. And then, you're like, oh, okay. And then they cut away and they cut back to Vettel, who has the exact same puncture on the exact same tyre. And I literally, like I said, I called it. I was like, I've seen this movie before, basically. I've seen this before. If it happens. And then, so Bottas gets it, he got it just crossing the line, didn't he? Coming out of Vale and Club, he got the puncture going over the start finish.
Yeah.
And you saw it go and you're like, oh no. I was like, in my head, I'm like, oh, I couldn't have predicted this. It couldn't have happened again.
Yeah.
And then I think it was...
Well, lo and behold, Crofty cuts to what he thinks is Lewis Hamilton's car, which in reality it's Bottas's car. And then they come back to Hamilton and then they go, oh my God, here we go again.
They're like, it's Lewis. And you're like, oh my God. You're like, no way. It hasn't happened. And then, I think that was more the directors, they put Lewis Hamilton's thing when it was actually Bottas and we were like, this isn't happening. And then later on, you get into Cops again, where Kvyat went off. Sainz then gets a puncture. You're like, oh my God, here we go again. Like Pirelli, they haven't had a problem like this since 2017. You're like,
I think as well, you would not have expected, given the number of safety car laps that there were, you would not have expected the tyre deck to be that bad, because the tyres weren't really worked all that hard for a large... Well, I think, wasn't there 18 laps of safety car, was it?
Yeah, well, there were 12 laps. Yeah, 12 laps. Because they spent the first...
Up to lap 20.
They spent the first third of the race under the safety car, which was mental. They only had 6 laps of racing before.
Well, yeah, so you would think, 18, considering they pitted for tyres under the safety car, and then a couple of laps of the tyres not being worked at all, really. And then, you don't expect tyre deck to get to the point where cars are just getting punctures at the end of the race.
And then all of us British fans, you see it at the end of the lap, you see lap 52, like, he's only got a lap to go,
Yeah.
He'll make it. And then all us British fans saw the worst thing we saw going into Brooklands and coming out of Luffield. You see that left front go on Hamilton. I was like, it's happened again.
Well, then on the last lap, and you see, they show the shot of him going into the penultimate corner, and just as he comes out of screen, you can see Max just eating away at the time, and you think, oh my god, this is going to be really close.
How on earth he managed to I know he probably actually got lucky where it happened at Brooklands. You get, because obviously then you come out of Luffield Woodcut and you get Maggots and Beckett's. How he managed to get through Maggots and Beckett's, getting that, I don't know if that's the fastest part of the circuit, and he's driving on 3 tyres. He's probably lucky there weren't more corners. Like he said, he really struggled to get it stopped down to the finish.
It was, for some part, we were like, well, this is a pretty boring race.
It was boring,
Mercedes miles out in front, Verstappen racing by himself. Charles Leclerc, like as I said earlier, just mystified how he is where he is. And then, the rest of the race. And then all of a sudden, within the space of about 5, not even 5 laps, like 3 laps, and it just all kicks off and goes absolutely nuts.
And even the Landog said, that middle part of the race probably looked boring on TV. And
I'm not saying it was, but yeah, I think
it wasn't boring for F1 fans, but you could see like it does get a bit procession-y at times.
Yeah, but that's why sometimes some people say, some of the people that have been listening say, we're not that into F1, so we kind of just gloss over the F1 bit. But that's where F1 just becomes so cool. You just sat there on the edge of your seat.
Yeah,
do you know what I mean?
And especially like they said, when they cut to Bottas struggling home and they put Lewis Hamilton, you're like, oh my god, like where does this? And then they brought in. I think Red Bull made the right decision to bring him in. You can't.
Yeah, well, that's what I think. I completely agree with you.
Yeah, you hedge against both things. You get the fastest lap, and you also set yourself up well that if you did get a puncture, you can say, look, we made this decision to not get a puncture. We've seen what's happened, and it was the right decision. But yeah, again, Charles Leclerc.
Yeah, let's talk a bit about Ferrari, because I think Leclerc and Vettel. If I was Vettel, I'd just be going. I'd just be like,
put the reserve driver.
That's what I was going to say. The exact thing. I don't want to be here. You don't want me to be here. Why don't you just put the reserve driver?
Like we get, he loves racing, and it's
But I think it's a bit disrespectful to a 4-time world champion to be blatantly fake. Because that's the thing. We said this about Albon at Red Bull, and when George Russell said he's being made to look like an idiot. It's exactly the same things happening to Seb Vettel, in my opinion. I wouldn't take that as say I'm a 4-time world champion. I'm out of the people that are left on this grid, apart from Lewis Hamilton. Yeah. I'm one of the best drivers on this, in terms of wins and world championship wins and that kind of thing.
He's only what?
I don't, I could pretty much, any team here would want to have me if they had the space. So
he's only one of 3 world champions still left on the grid.
Yeah.
Because you got Hamilton, him and Raikkonen. And he's like, he's part of an illustrious group. And yet, he qualified 10th.
Like, do you reckon Leclerc is just that good?
Yeah.
What, that he can out-qualify Vettel by that much? Really?
You know me, mate. I know
you're a big, but you don't reckon there's any difference in the car?
I think there's clearly a difference.
Yeah, I
think you give him equal cars. I still think Charles Leclerc comes out on top.
What, by 6 places?
Not by 6 places. 1 or 2. What, like he?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying.
Equal car. Well, you look, he had the most poles, but I think it's not 6. He's not a 6 place better driver.
No.
It's like Hamilton and Bottas. Bottas is, if I'm being honest, even without like whatever iteration of Bottas 2.0, 3.0, whatever you want to call him, whatever you want to call him, he is a great driver and he's probably up there, but he's not. Yeah, like Bottas really on talent is like 4th or 5th for me, and I don't think he's up there with. I think, to be honest, the top 5 is how I'd rate drivers at the moment on talent. Probably. Like Hamilton, Verstappen, Leclerc, Ricciardo, Norris. For me, those are 5, like probably my top 5 drivers in the sport right now. And that's, it's good to see that we got so much variety. Yeah. I know there's been chaos, like it's Austria in the first race, and now the ending here where we get Ferrari, Renault, McLaren. It's great to see those cars back up, and it's nice to see the fight again. But it's so good to see. I'm loving the F1.
It's been
I tell you what, for something that was away for so long, it has not disappointed.
But just to finish, I'll say we are going to move on to the next topic very shortly. But I want to say Vettel. They said on the commentary before the race started, he was seen over there Give a little elbow bump to Lawrence Stroll in the garage, so you never know.
Aston Martin Racing Notes. Yeah, I think it's happening.
I think it would. Well, I would love to see it.
They got a German in
to see it, especially because Vettel, he will outstrip the Ferraris by miles next year if he's in that car.
He'll just have the proverbial middle finger to.
Well, he will, because Ferrari said, didn't they said we're not going to challenge for any races until at least 2022.
Yeah, they know that these set of rules don't favour them, especially after they got screwed by the.
And that's not because I don't like Ferrari. I'm again, like I just like to see the races competitive and the teams doing well, and you'd like to see a competitive Ferrari, but I don't agree with how Vettel's been treated at all. Yeah, well, I don't think any driver deserves to be treated like that, let alone a four-time world champion.
Like, he's had enough. Like, we get that he has issues, and issues aren't Ferrari's fault necessarily. Like, sometimes you can't predict how the cars are going to move, especially with all these new complicated engines. You know, you got the MGUK, all that stuff. But it just seems like everything that's bad has happened to Vettel, and everything good has happened to Charles. Like, even Charles, like Vettel's best chance when Charles took him out, that again was Charles' fault. But he still, he still didn't lose anything to Vettel because Vettel was taken out. So it's very similar. I think you're right, mate. I think Verstappen and Leclerc are so far ahead of their teammates, and also so far ahead in the minds of Matteo Binotto and Christian Horner, that they're favoured, and it's weird to see. Anyway,
shall we move on? Come on, Ev, sidle over. Join me in the slip cordon.
I will.
All right, get set.
I will.
Hands out. Let's go.
Move over from fine leg. Here I come. Right.
Oh, okay. So obviously, I thought we'd talk about a little bit about the series as a whole between England and the West Indies. Don't want to, spend too much time talking about it, because I do actually want to look forward to next week and the start of the England-Pakistan series.
Also, the fact it wasn't much of a contest after the first test.
It wasn't, and I was very generous to the West Indies team. I said I thought that they were an excellent side, and I really was and I think for the first test they showed how good they can be. But I feel like I said it in the first episode. It might be in episode 2, I can't remember. But both the teams were good enough to capitalise on mistakes.
Yep.
And that's exactly what England did. Not only were they just a better team, they capitalised on the weak areas of the West Indies game, which were namely in the field. And they don't have many of, like, if you look at the West Indies side, you don't see, we got, say England have got Ben Stokes and Joe Root. When you look at those, you say they are among the best batsmen in the world. When you look at that West Indies side, there are many batsmen when you say, but as in they some of them are fantastic batsmen, but they haven't had the chance to prove themselves properly, because a lot of them are quite an inexperienced lineup. So you don't look at them and go, world class, showed himself, proved it to everyone, like you do when you look at Ben Stokes or when you look at Joe Root. And I think, but Pakistan, I'll talk about Pakistan. Let's keep it on England, West Indies for a moment. I think England capitalised on that, and there were some excellent bowling performances in the third test. Like Stuart Broad, it was criminal to leave him out of the side in the first place. I just can't think of an England side without Stuart Broad in at the moment. I look at the form.
I don't know how you justify it.
I don't really know how you justify it. Him and Anderson are the most experienced bowlers when it comes to bowling in English conditions. They prove time and time again that they can take lots of wickets bowling in English conditions, and they love it. So why would you not put him in there? That just doesn't make any sense to me. But he bowled excellently well. He put 60 runs on the board in the second innings, and again it was almost like a match-winning performance again. And obviously, when you look back at the series as a whole, you got the standout performances, from Joe Root in terms of England, taking wickets, scoring big scores. Dom Sibley, a couple of 50s, and a ton to his name. Really glad to see that, because I was critical of him in the first episode
Very
of the podcast.
critical.
I said, I would say I'm more critical of the England batting order than of Dom Sibley specifically.
Rightly so, though. But it was justified.
Yeah, and I think they'll have a lot more problems in this Pakistan test if they don't sort that out properly. Yeah. But I really think Sibley could slot into this side very well of playing that anchoring role that England haven't really properly had in this generation, of someone who can stand there all day and bat and do it well. Because, a couple of 50s and 100, he might have had a duck in one game, but that's what you want to see. Obviously, you don't want to see him getting ducks. But
one thing I wanted to bring up, Nath, would you say that the reintroduction of Joe Root swung the pendulum in the favour of England? Him coming back and his captaining?
I don't know. I think Ben Stokes would be an excellent captain, but Joe Root has been the captain for so many years now that when you think, it's a bit like Alistair Cook when he was at England.
Model of consistency, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, like he was just Strauss and both Strauss and Cook. You can look at them and see from their eras when they were at their absolute pinnacle. So they were like the cornerstone of the England Test team at that point, because they just were looked at. I think Joe Root's looked at in a similar vein. He's become a very experienced Test captain now, and obviously when you have a player like that who can also, I think it's the confidence of knowing you have someone in your team that when the chips are down, they can swing the entire game. Yeah, they can just change the game single-handedly with a big score or something like that.
Even his little bits of bowling that he brings in.
He is a useful bowler, he bowls a few overs, takes up some time. And you need someone like that because obviously you need someone to... It's hard. You can't bowl over after over after over. Like, they bowled Jofra Archer a lot. Like, I think personally he should have had more breaks, but he was just running in and bowling and bowling and bowling. And, like, you need someone because you can't just rely on the same four bowlers all day. It's just not going to happen.
I think the thing with Jofra is, though, because it looks so fluid for him, you forget how
he's very effortless.
He's bowling.
Yeah, he's very effortless. He runs in like it just doesn't look like he's bowling that quick. From the viewer's perspective, and then you look at the the speedo at the bottom, and 90 miles an hour, 89 miles an hour, 88 miles an hour.
When we were watching it, I thought, okay, he's bowled a medium. I haven't seen that from Jofra. It came up 89 miles an hour. I was like, how has he done that? Yeah, so you wanted to preview a little bit of the
I just wanted Pakistan to talk through it a bit, because I think it'll be a good series. I think Pakistan are coming here with a lot to, they want to prove themselves. I think this team is actually pretty good. I think it may present more problems to England than this West Indies side.
Right.
Mainly because they do have a few batsmen in their lineup when you look at them and think, he is world class. Like Babar Azam. You can't. You look at him, and he's one of the best batsmen in the world. He's in the top 5, probably top 3, really, of best batsmen in the world. So I think if he has a big series and he's able to utilize the talent that he has, he can again. He's another one that can single-handedly build an innings and win his side, a test.
Yeah.
But then you've got like the Azhar Alis as well, and it's a good batting lineup. There's potential that they maybe don't have the depth, but their top 5 are very good. But that's the thing with the West Indies. Even though they may have not had any standout world-class batsmen, they did have depth of good batsmen. Right the way down to, I think Jason Holder was coming in at number 7, maybe.
Yeah.
He was coming in. He had double 100 against England last summer, and. Maybe Pakistan don't have that same depth, but they do have world-class batting talent in their side. Yeah. And I don't know. I think they've got a young bowling attack, somewhat inexperienced bowling attack, but there is again no doubt that there are. You got Yasser Shah. He took 10 wickets against England in 2016.
In one innings.
One innings took all 10 wickets. I think, if I'm not mistaken, it was the second fastest 10-wicket haul in a single innings. I could be wrong on that. It may be that might not be true, but I'm pretty sure it was the second fastest 10-wicket haul in Test cricket. And he's a world-class spin bowler. And we saw glimpses of Shaheen Afridi's talent in the World Cup last year. Again, not Test format, but he's a young bowler with a lot to prove for himself, and I think he relished in the opportunity to bowl. And I think English conditions suit him as well. Pakistan has a long history of producing very good swing bowling talent, and I think he may very well suit English conditions. And then you got the young Naseem Shah as well. Him actually in the warm-up games this week, Shaheen Afridi and Naseem Shah both took a fair few wickets, if I'm not mistaken. I'm pretty sure they both took a fair few wickets, but I think it's a pretty good. So I look at the side and I think, wow, they are some standout players. They could really do some damage to, especially some of these young bowlers. A lot of England's top order are quite inexperienced. Like the Sibleys and the obviously I think who was dropped. Not Joe Denley. Was it Joe Denley?
I thought it was Denley who got dropped.
Yeah, it was Joe Denley who got dropped. Denley's not really inexperienced, actually. He's just in a horrible run of form at the moment. But, the Sibleys, the Crawleys, the Ollie Popes, they are inexperienced at this level of Test cricket. And I think people like Yasser Shah, not so much Afridi and Naseem Shah, but they are very good bowlers. And against an inexperienced ban attack, there is a potential for all sorts of stuff to go horribly wrong.
Yeah.
And I think the Pakistan ban attack will give England's bowlers a lot more problems.
No.
But again, England seems unchanged for this test. But I think that it will. I think England again. They are, after the first test when they had a bit of a wobble. I think they are showing that they're in pretty good form under English conditions. So I think it'll be a much closer contest. But I don't know. I can't really choose a winner at this stage. I'm going to have a little look. Maybe next week we'll start picking winners.
So just circling back to the West Indies and England series, I just wanted to my man of the tournament, or man of the series for me is it's Broad. As good as Ben Stokes was, when Broad came in, he changed the whole dynamic and he got his 500th wicket.
Yeah,
so
I do see that.
I think you've got to give it to him.
Stokes.
I know he's Ben. Listen,
gotta be.
If we're all about best overall player and talent and everything,
but I guess it's hard to give player of the series to someone that only played one test.
Yeah,
for me, that's why when I think of performers, Stokes bowled a lot of overs.
Yeah.
He didn't hit. He hit the 176, and then he had a couple of useful 40s. I'm not sure. Did he have a 70 in the third test? Well, I think he is 70 in the third test as well. I think it's, for me, it's got to be Ben Stokes.
Fair enough.
I think there were. I love Jason Holt as a player, but I think there were some poor captain decisions as well.
Yeah.
I think bowling first twice.
That's.
I can't remember. It might be Manchester. I can't remember, but I think he picked a ball.
It was
first
Old Trafford.
Yeah, was it Old Trafford? Yeah, I think that was a poor decision.
I think only one team's deciding to bowl first or something. It's a weird record that he decided to bowl first.
Yeah,
against England as well.
But I actually when I was reading up on some of the team selections for this England-Pakistan test, I found a piece by. Let me just check who it was because I want to make sure I give proper credit. Ed Hawkins.
Right.
I did a piece for Betfair and he highlighted that Babar Azam, in the last 2 years of Test cricket, he's hit 1,000 runs, and the only person with a higher batting average who's also hit 1,000 runs is Steve Smith. His average across those 1,000 runs is 60. Where is it? I think 67.4. I think was where I saw it at.
Yeah.
But that is crazy when you think that the only person who's got a higher average over those 1,000 runs than him is Steve Smith. And we all know, 64.9 average was. He's got 1,234 runs in the last few years, an average of 64.9.
Yeah.
And the only person better than that is Steve Smith, who's got an average of 71.
That's absurd. So,
He is. I'm really excited to watch him play. I'm hoping, just for purely as a point of a cricket fan, I would like to see a big score from him because he is really a joy to watch as a player. He really is that good to watch. So if you maybe not that much into cricket and you do want to have a watch of this test series, Babar Azam will definitely be one to watch. I mean, you obviously probably, we got the Ben Stokes. We've seen what they can do.
We know what he is.
Yeah, we all know about how good Ben Stokes is. But if you're looking for somebody else to watch,
the Ginger Prince of English cricket, we know what he's doing.
But yeah, Babar Azam, trust me, if he gets a big score on the board, it will be an innings to watch.
Very good, very good. I think we should probably talk about what happened yesterday in the FA Cup.
I actually did watch some of it.
Did you?
I said last week that I will try and watch more sports that I'm not that familiar with. So I did have a little watch of the FA Cup. Yeah,
and it was.
I'm probably still not going to talk very much about it though.
Well, for me, it was a game between two teams that were very evenly matched. Actually, surprisingly, considering league positions and how they played all season. I think it was a bit weird to see how close they actually were. And if anything, Arsenal looked better than Chelsea. And Frank Lampard's really coming under fire in finals because he hasn't won one yet. I know he's lost Eden Hazard. He was only in Derby playoff final, but something looked off with Chelsea after the first 15 minutes where they looked dominant. You were like, oh no, it's going to be a long day here for Arsenal because Chelsea were just all over them. Obviously, they got their goal early through Captain America, as they call him now, and Christian Pulisic, who's had the hype thrust upon him yet again. which is what we tend to see from players of, let's say North American persuasion who come over. You know, they get the American backing, they get everyone's backing. He's a great player. Don't get me wrong; he's amazingly talented, and I think he will go far. But I think some of the hype needs to slow down a little bit. But he's played amazingly, and he got his goal in an FA Cup final, so you can't really bemoan it too much. And then after that, really, I'd say Arsenal looked comfortable. I saw
the Aubameyang goal. I think it was the second goal.
Yeah, the one where he faked out Rudiger?
Because he had a penalty first goal, didn't he? Was
yes.
it Aubameyang again?
Yeah, it was Aubameyang got a double.
I did see the second goal. That was nice.
That
was nice.
I think it was lamented a very bad day at the office for Azpilicueta, who obviously, unfortunately, was forced off through a hamstring injury early in the first half, I believe. And then Aubameyang, you know, they played, in essence, they played a very similar style to how Leicester played. They had Vardy back in the day, and they just pumped a long ball from, I believe it was Tierney or someone, from the back left, played a lovely ball over the top of the defence, let Aubameyang try and chase it, and he just gave Azpilicueta twisted blood, really, and he just really forced him into making a challenge, which Azpilicueta wouldn't normally make, but he would have been in on goal. So gave away a penalty. It wasn't a red card because he wasn't the last man. There was cover, and then obviously Aubameyang did what Aubameyang's been doing, just dispatched it. Like, honestly, without Aubameyang, Arsenal would be woeful, absolutely woeful, because they haven't got much outside of him.
Yeah, I think I didn't watch the whole game, but I did see some trending on Twitter. There was quite a lot of debate about Chelsea's red card. Disgust
for me, to be honest, mate. It was absolutely criminal.
I think when you look at it in slow speed, even at slow speed, it doesn't really look like there's nothing in there. But then when you look at it at full speed, you're like, how have you seen anything?
In real time, you see him go. You see Xhaka go down, as he does. In fact, Kovacic's first yellow card was for a challenge on Xhaka, and then he's and then obviously Xhaka's gone onto a loose ball. Kovacic has put his foot there. Like, normally you would see a foul, but Xhaka's then stood on his foot, then gone over like he's been fouled, and then the ref's given his second yellow and given a red card. It was criminal. I know, we've heard the argument, don't let the referee make the decision.
Yeah.
Like, don't put him in that situation, but surely this is where, I know it's a second yellow, so it's not straight red, so they can't bring in VAR, but this is something where they need to just look at it and be like, come on.
Yeah, I guess it's a bit like in rugby, decisions like that tend to get checked.
Yeah.
They will nearly always get checked, if it's a high tackle or a dangerous tackle, and, the ref's deliberating about whether or not a card is due. That's kind of, for me, that's the whole point of video replay, is to, if you think, it's not every, if you don't think there's anything in it, then don't use it. But if you think, this is maybe an important decision in terms of the dynamic of the game.
Exactly.
And I'm not too sure about whether I've seen enough to make that decision, but there may be some cause there that warrants investigating. To me, that's what the whole point of video replay technology is for.
And I don't want to use the point of it's a cup final, but at the end of the day,
it
is a cup final. And it's not like, if you can't do it for every yellow card, you'll be there for hours.
No.
The game will be ruined. But for a second yellow in a cup final where it's completely swung the momentum of the game.
Because I do agree with you, though, when you say you can't use it too much, because I do think, me personally, cricket has started to go that way.
Yeah, they refer quite a bit.
Where they refer everything, every ball that's a wicket, it gets checked for a no ball. It gets checked. That takes out some of the fun of the game. And I do really, you want to catch the wrong decisions, but not every single decision ever made in the game goes upstairs.
And just a closing point, not closing, but just to finish off the FA Cup kind of review, let's call it. The final goal that Aubameyang scored was a beautiful finish. First off, started off by a great driving run from Hector Bellerin, who came onto the ball, beat a couple players, and then it got played out found his way to Aubameyang, who then absolutely just sold the defender down a river and then finished beautifully with a left-footed chip over Willie Caballero, who one of our mates made the interesting point that he's actually older than Mikel Arteta.
Yeah.
So, shout out to him for that
I know
interesting
Harry's
fact.
very keen to get that fact.
Yep.
So here you go, Harry. This one's for you, mate.
Oh, and also he wanted to mention it was a catastrophe with
with Haas.
Yes.
Their race was a catastrophe. So yeah, that one's in there now as well.
Yeah, there you go. But yeah, so and then Arsenal won 2-1, and Mikel Arteta, he's got his first trophy now. He's looking like he's getting the team in his sort of shape with a 3-back and these wing backs now that are looking brilliant, and they're starting to play a bit. So you're looking forward to next season. Maybe they can make a top 4 challenge if they can get the right sort of players. But
yeah,
I did want to mention that the 2 Spanish players in the team, in the outfield, of Dani Ceballos and Hector Bellerin, I thought they had amazing games yesterday. And I thought they were the 2 standout players for Arsenal. I've been very critical of Bellerin recently, especially under Arteta. I don't think he's really performed, but I thought yesterday he was amazing. He controlled the game well. He kept a lot of the players around him very quiet, which is weird to do against Chelsea. You normally see them breaking and, breaking down defences, but it was good to see from Bellerin.
So we got about 10 or 15 minutes left to go.
So we're going to...
I know you wanted to touch on some of the NBA stuff we've seen, and a bit on the NHL as well.
Yeah, well, it says... I'll start there, actually, with the hockey. Yes, I want to, make my claim as Canada's adopted son. Well, I say Canada, mainly Vancouver, but I just want to talk about their chances and how the teams look this year with the Vancouver Canucks in hockey. It's a weird one because whilst they're currently in 7th position in the standings, and I think they've played the Minnesota Wild in NHL's new playoff system for the Stanley Cup that they're going to implement for this year, obviously given the COVID and everything. I think they've got a chance to not go deep because they're a young team behind they've got some amazing players like Elias Pettersson, who won Rookie of the Year last year, is incredible. Like he plays the game the right way. He's like a young Connor McDavid for me. You wouldn't know who that is.
That was just insert. Hockey is a sport very little about.
He's but he does everything. He scores, he assists. But I think another factor for the Canucks, with Brock Besser, with Elias Pettersson, with JT Miller, all these players that they've got, it's kind of a detriment that the Vancouver health minister was very reluctant to make them a hub city. And it's weird because they've been such a good team at home under the power play and with their young attack that it's been great to watch, and they're so dynamic up front. But on the road, they haven't been great, and that's where they've lost a lot of their points in games this year. But I'm still hopeful that they can do it.
Yeah.
But I like them. I think they might be able to win 1, maybe 2 playoff series if it all falls the right way on the ice.
Who else in the NHL are you excited to see in terms of other teams that you think could be making plays? I think Vegas. Honestly, I know they're a new startup, but they've seemed to have got it together very quickly in their like I said, in their short span in the NHL. Yeah. I think they've done really well, and it's weird. It's good to see. Always good to see expansion teams that come in and actually play really well. And I think obviously you got to look at the St. Louis Blues. Trying to go back to back. I think they've obviously got a chance, and the Boston Bruins are back, so Boston fans will be happy, as they always are. And they've got a chance as well. So there's a couple teams I want to keep my eye on. Obviously, I'll be rooting for the Canucks, but And so anyway, off the hockey into the NBA. Yeah.
And that's
into the 3-point zone.
Yeah. It was a good start in the NBA restart. You had the battle for Los Angeles in Orlando, which is a bit weird, but you had
I actually watched some of this as well.
You had a good game.
I'm sticking to my commitment.
Yes, you are. You had a good game from some people on the Lakers. Not much help off the bench, and I think it was glaring that without Lou Williams and Montrezl Harrell for the Clippers, the Lakers are going to struggle when it gets to the playoffs, and if they have to play them in a series with the depth. I know they've just brought in J.R. Smith and Dion Waiters, but there's they need to get the chemistry right. I know they haven't got a lot of time, but I think you'd be a bit worried if you're a Lakers fan right now and they just lost last night to the Toronto Raptors.
I see.
And they got held to one of their worst shooting performances of the year, if not the worst shooting performance. So you're kind of starting to look a bit like, oh no, like, can LeBron do it? I think he'll figure it out.
Because he did look pretty good in
he looked okay,
from what I watched of that game.
And he also, he got the game.
My very limited knowledge of basketball.
He got the game winner, obviously driving. It was a game winner. It was like kind of a go ahead with like 12 seconds to go, but goes for a layup, misses the layup short, grabs his own rebound, finishes strongly, and then they close out the game and win a very tight contest. But they did what they needed to do. Anthony Davis looked amazing in that game. Paul George was just raining in threes, and he's been doing that. Like, I think yesterday they played New Orleans, and he only made 8 baskets, and all 8 baskets were 3 points. Like, that's what he does. Like, Paul George is an amazing player, and I think they're going to struggle. But LeBron, one thing I will mention is his defense looks impeccable right now, and he looks rejuvenated. He looks like his old Miami Heat defending, which is what Lakers want to see. Just a quick mention on a couple other teams. Watch out for the Rockets. I know in my preview I have said I think the Rockets are probably the 3rd best team in the West to actually win the whole thing, because their pace and what they can deliver in terms of speed is amazing. I know they had a great comeback behind James Harden's 49 points against the Dallas Mavericks, but the pace that they just rain shots in. And Dallas looked good though, behind Luka Doncic and Kristaps Porzingis. And I think there's a lot of teams out west now that
you said you're in a couple of episodes ago. You're excited to see him.
Yeah, I'm excited to see Luka, my boy, the Slovenian god. But he's now they look good. Houston, they look really good, and Milwaukee looked mighty. Giannis Antetokounmpo is a beast. Like, there's no stopping him right now. He's starting to chuck in a couple threes. He's fixed his. I think they said he'd already missed 200 free throws up to that point in the season, which is crazy for someone who's that good. And if he can just figure that out, his points per game will go through the roof. And I think they could win it. Like, watching the early games, it looks like your 2 favorites now, after watching the early restart, and it was very early into this kind of restart in this bubble, but Milwaukee and the Clippers look like the class of the NBA right now. So that's all I wanted to say. I know you wanted to talk about this festival of rugby that was announced.
I think it's great.
Yeah,
I really do. I think so they've said I think November, December, I think is when.
Yeah, just after the conclusion of the Six Nations is when they're going to play it.
But I think it will be. I think it'd be great to see the Japan, and so let me just outline it for people that might be unaware. So all the Six Nations teams and Japan and Fiji are planned a festival of rugby tournament in which those teams will split into 2 groups, so 4 teams in each group. And then kind of replaces the Autumn Internationals.
Yeah.
But I think it's great. I think Japan and Fiji are 2 teams that need more exposure to high standards of rugby, because they're just not getting it at the moment. I especially think, after what we've seen from Japan in the last 2 World Cups, I mean, they need high level exposure, because they could really become a force to be reckoned with.
Tell you what, Scotland are going to be looking over their shoulder like, we got to play these guys again.
Yeah.
Why do we have to play them again? Like, Scotland is like, I know they had a great game, but they struggle.
Well, I think what's become obvious is that teams have just underestimated Japan as a rugby force. But what it has come to show after that game against South Africa in 2015 will go down as one of the best Rugby World Cup games of all time. It will. There's no way it's going to be a classic that future generations will be told about, of young rugby players. And, when it's 2 a.m. and you're trying to find something to watch on TV and you go on Sky Sports and you see rugby games that change the world, that will be on there.
Yeah, you hope so.
And I think it's obviously shown Japan are committed to becoming a top-tier rugby nation. And I feel like this is the first time properly that World Rugby, I've given them something to facilitate that. Because it's hard for a nation that's trying to come up into the upper echelons of international rugby. What have they... Because the thing is, it's kind of like, when England go to New Zealand, they fill stadiums, but you kind of think like Japan, they haven't had enough stuff put on the table. That's World Rugby's job, really, at the end of the day. And Japan have proved that they've got their heads in the right place when it comes to rugby. They really are trying, and they are making big strides into becoming a top tier rugby nation. And I'm glad to see that they're finally facilitating that for Japan. And same for Fiji. Like, Fiji have got just raw rugby talent running through their whole country. But that'll be great for Fiji, because I think everybody knows that when Fiji get the ball in hand and they start throwing it around, you get some of the most exciting rugby to watch of any team in the world.
Nothing better than when you see them throwing it about like with the kind of beach rugby style that they play with.
But like, that's the thing. They need more exposure. That's the problem with a lot. Because let's say for Fiji, they might play one international against a top-tier rugby nation a year. It's just not enough. If you look at, the top-tier rugby nations, like New Zealand's, Australia's, Wales, England, all those kind of teams, they play against top-tier nations pretty much the whole season. And then some of the off-season, or what we call the off-season here. And you just think, with them getting all that exposure against the best teams in the world, you're going to think, how are the teams that are trying to come up, like your Fiji's, like your Japan's,
Georgia.
I was going to say Georgia, those kind of teams, you can just never have a level playing field unless World Rugby facilitates more opportunities for those teams to do things.
New Zealand of Vern Cotter is the new coach of Fiji. But we would be remiss in continuing our unbiased way in this podcast if we didn't mention that we're a little bit scared of facing Fiji again. We seem to...
Wales have a really terrible record playing against Fiji.
Yeah, you talk about our bogey team. I definitely think Fiji's up there with the bogey team
Let's
for
just
Wales.
not talk about 2007 ever again.
God, that was the worst, possibly the worst day of my rugby life, if any. Yeah, because I haven't really seen much of the early 2000s where we won wooden spoon and stuff, like when we were really bad. But that was just such a hard day to take, and I'm glad we're in a good place.
I
now.
had 3 New Zealanders come and stay in my house that were my dad's friends, and during that World Cup, because they went to go and watch New Zealand France, and obviously we all know what happened there. And 3 very upset New Zealanders came home. Yeah,
so it was. So I think it'll be brilliant for rugby. It'll give us another, because we've had such a big break, and I know we've got the European competition starting back up, but it'll just be a nice little teaser as well, because you look at this Southern Hemisphere teams like Fiji, and you look at Japan, and they should be creating like a Six Nations with, even if you wanted to take out South Africa and Argentina, which I don't think, because I know that some talk about South Africa, like, I know the teams are trying to get into the Pro 14, they're trying to get more teams into the Pro 14, which I don't think is bad. I like the diversity of the teams, and it'll be great for the Pro 14 to grow more of a market, because the Pro 14 needs more of a market, because it lags so far behind the Pro 14 in top 14 in France and the Gallagher Premiership. But I just think the Southern Hemisphere, I think if they just created a Six Nations, put Fiji, Japan, or even if those nations wanted to create their own little
but that's
tournament.
World Rugby's job. They need to do that.
Yeah, I agree, and I think... I'm
not saying that I think World Rugby is a bad organisation, but they need to do more.
It's hard to leave out Japan, given their previous World Cup experience.
Well, just look at those 3 teams. Japan, Fiji, and Argentina have really shown they are committed to becoming top-tier rugby nation. And How have they not got a tournament yet?
And off the back of a couple of good performances from the Pumas, they put them in the Rugby Championship. What's stopping them from putting Japan in?
Yeah.
Japan, they've beaten South Africa at a World Cup. They've beaten Scotland at a World Cup. They've beaten great teams.
And they look
good.
They look good.
They look like they can play. it's weird that they haven't got a spot in any competition.
And I
at the
think
moment.
as well, when it comes, this is the point I think I was trying to make earlier about, when you say when England go to New Zealand, they fill stadiums. But it's not just that. Obviously, rugby's a tough game, and you can't play all year round because you need time to recover.
Yeah.
And I think when it comes to organising international tours through the summer, or or having teams come over during our in-season, they're always going to give priority to the New Zealands and the South Africas and the Australias, and because they know they'll sell more tickets.
Because that's what they've got to do. They've got 4 tests, haven't they?
Especially in this post-COVID era where teams are struggling desperately for money.
Yeah, but we've seen it with Wales. You get your South Africa, New Zealand, Australia. Normally you pick 2 of those. You then probably play the Barbarians occasionally, and then you get one day when they call it family night or something, or they try and get more people in, and they will put a Fiji or a Samoa or a Tonga or Japan. It used to be, wasn't it? Those used to be the sort of games they used to put on that 4th slate. And like I said, it's just they need to start bringing them through, really developing the game over there, because they need to create a fan base as well. And then they should get But
I think, just to wrap up, I think that's a really, really good step forward into, and I hope it continues.
If I'm honest, I wouldn't be upset if they replace the Autumn Internationals with this Festival of Rugby sort of tournament, because it's great seeing, your New Zealand, your Australia, but we tour there. We'll tour there in the summer, and then we'll play them again in the autumn. Yeah. Listen, we want to play New Zealand and we want to play Australia. See how we go up against the best teams as much as we can. We're not disputing that, but I also don't mind if you want to bring in a Georgia or a Fiji or Japan to play in these sorts of tournaments.
No, I agree, 100%.
Like, because outside of the World Cup, when do we really see, these games? Only in the Autumn Internationals
or in the World Cup.
So I think it just throws a lot of spanners, and it could bring through teams like Italy to give them, a chance to really test themselves and see if they can do it. And we're not discounting the Northern Hemisphere teams as being superior. Like, we know that Japan and Fiji aren't just going to come over and roll over and get, dominated by everyone. We know that they're probably going to beat a couple of teams. Yeah, probably. Fiji will probably end up beating us.
Based on the record.
Just like the 2017 Grand Prix. We've seen this movie before. Yeah. but
yeah, no, I'm excited.
Yeah, I can't wait. I think
we've gone slightly over.
I think I might. Yeah, I think we're. I
think we've slightly over. Sorry, we would like to normally end it, but
yeah, we got a bit carried away with the rugby
and the F1
and the F1 again. Yeah, it's always the F1.
Yeah, we'll be back again next Monday. Yep. Thank you wherever you may be listening from for tuning in. If you're on YouTube, make sure you drop us a like and drop us a sub. Same on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Make sure you give us a follow. Drop us a rating if you are on Apple Podcasts. All our social media links are down in description if you are on YouTube. So our Instagram and Facebook are both literally EveryDay, which is one word, Pundits. And you can find us there. Make sure you go drop us a like, drop us a follow. Feel free to message us any suggestions or anything you have or topics you'd like us to cover. And we'll see you again next week. Thanks very much, Ev.
Thanks very much.